In this video, we're going to talk about grouping and parenting objects in 3ds Max. So grouping and parenting is going to be very important to us because it allows us to take multiple objects and basically condense them into a single object. Now, it's not truly a single object, it's going to group them, so it makes it easier to manage inside of the scene. So let's select all three of our objects, and let's go up to the top and go to Group, and then hit Group. This is going to allow us to name the group itself, so we're going to call this Standard Primitives, and hit Enter. Notice what it's done here in the Scene Explorer. It has created our group, and then it has, I don't want to say parented, but it has contained all of these objects in that group. So now if I select the object, it selects the entire group, no matter which one it is. Now whenever we're working with groups, there are some things that we need to know. First of all, we have lots of different options when it comes to grouping. We can group an object, we can ungroup a grouped object. So in this case, if I wanted to get rid of it, I could just hit ungroup. I also have the option to open, and when I open it, you'll notice this pink bounding box that shows up. And this allows me to select the individual objects in that group and then modify them. So let's say that I wanted to change the shape or perhaps the position of this sphere. I could do that without hurting anything else inside of that group. So let's flatten it out and make it kind of a candy pill shaped here. And let's go ahead and remove that or deselect that, and then we're going to go to Group, and then I can hit Close. Now you'll notice that it's not allowing me to close that. That's because I don't have anything selected. So let's select one of the objects in there. Let's hit Group and then Close. So now my group is still together, but I have access to modify the individual objects as I need to using Open. Now also inside of that menu we have Open Recursively. And what that means is whenever we select an object that is a main group object, and we have multiple groups inside of that group, we can open all of them at the same time. And that's what Open Recursively does. Now we've already talked about what Close does, but what about Attach and Detach? Let's say that we wanted to add another object to our Standard Primitives group. Let's take this torus and let's drag it out. And I'm going to make it smaller. And let me drag this down. And I want to add this to my group. So to add that object to my group, I'll just simply go to the group, go to Group, and then Attach. But you'll notice it's not showing up. Let's select the other object that we want to attach the group to. So let's go to Group, and then Attach, and then we get to select the group. And there we go. Now at any time I could detach an object, but I need to open it first. So let's take the sphere, let's go to Group and then Detach, and now it's no longer part of that group, and then I need to close that group. So now it's just these three items, and then the sphere is now removed from that group. Now we also have Explode, which sounds awesome. What this will simply do is whenever we have an object like this and we just want to get rid of everything, we explode it. It's going to remove everything from the group, and it's going to remove everything, even all the groups inside of that. So let's take these two objects, let's group them together. I'm just going to call it Group 01, and let's take these two objects and let's group them. And then I'm going to take both of those group objects, and then I'm going to hit Group. Okay, so now I have one object that is made up of two groups which has multiple objects in that group. So if I go to Group and then I hit Explode, you'll notice that it gets rid of all groups and everything is just left by itself. Alright, so that's the basics of grouping. Now what we want to do is we want to talk about parenting. How is that different than grouping? Well, what I could do is I could actually parent an object to another. Now in 3ds Max, it's actually called link an object to another. And linking is done just a little bit differently. With linking, we have to make sure that we are paying attention to the the coordinate spaces of each object and the pivot points of each object, because they can be affected. Parenting is going to be particularly helpful whenever we start animating objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my selection tool, and I'm going to parent or link one object to another. So if I left click and drag on the torus and I drop on the sphere, what that's going to do is it's going to say, all right, this object that I have selected, I'm going to parent it to the other object, the one that we click on last. So once I release that, you'll notice that it highlighted, and now we see that torus is now a child of sphere 001. Now I could take sphere 001 and I could parent it to, let's say, the cone. And so now all three of those are now parented. Now the cone is the main parent, and then we have the sphere, and then we have the torus. Now I could also take this cone and parent it to the box. So now they are all children of the box, but they have their individual movements that they can do. So if I were to grab my move tool and I move this cone, notice that it's just moving these three. But if I take the box, it moves everything. It's the main parent. So it's inheriting, or the children are inheriting what their parents are doing. So I can grab this and I can move that around. I can take this individual object and move it around. But as I start to move the parents, the rest will follow along. Okay, so that's how parenting works. It's a little bit different than grouping. Grouping is just taking objects and basically gluing them together. The only way that we can move them individually is to open them as a group and then make the changes and then close that group, which can be a little daunting. But parenting has its uses, specifically in animation. We're going to talk more about this as we get to that section. So now that we've talked about the basics of working in 3ds Max, we've spent several lessons just working with some basic shapes. Let's go ahead and move into our next module, where we're going to talk about modeling and understanding the fundamentals of modeling.